What if everything you believed about male desire was never your belief to begin with, but a carefully planted illusion? What if your craving for sex was not really about sex at all, but a deeper hunger that has been misnamed, misdirected, and misunderstood for generations? This is not just a conversation about sexuality. It is a journey into the soul of the masculine. In this speech, we'll explore what Carl Jung tried to warn us about long before anyone was ready to hear it, that behind every physical impulse in a man lies a far more ancient longing, a hunger for wholeness. If you've ever felt like something's missing, even in moment of pleasure, this message is for you. Subscribe to Whispers of Psychology, share this awakening with someone still asleep, and prepare to look within. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a culture that reduces male desire to something embarrassingly simple. Lust, impulse, a physical itch. From advertising and entertainment, the message is loud and clear. Men are slaves to their hormones, and their craving is purely biological. But this is not just a shallow interpretation. It is a dangerous lie, one that leaves millions of men chasing something they can never catch, and worse, starving for something they can't even name. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, had a different view. He believed that the sexual impulse was not just about pleasure, but symbolism, that every physical longing is tied to a deeper emotional or spiritual need, and that the body is often trying to express what the soul cannot articulate. When a man experiences intense desire, it is often misinterpreted as purely physical attraction. But what Jung teaches us is revolutionary. What the man truly craves is not the woman's body, it is connection. It is recognition. It is to feel whole. And in that moment of desire, what he sees is not her, but something within himself reflected back through her image. This idea terrifies people because it removes the comfortable illusion that we can satisfy desire through action alone, that a night of passion or a string of partners can fill the void. But Jung's psychology shows that this craving isn't rooted in the body. It's rooted in the unconscious, the place where all the unmet needs, forgotten emotions, and unintegrated parts of ourselves live. When a man chases woman after woman or fantasy after fantasy, what he's really chasing is a feeling, a moment when the world pauses, when he feels alive, seen, validated, and whole. But here's the paradox. He's trying to find inside another what he has lost inside himself. And that's the tragedy. Because no matter how many bodies he conquers, no matter how many moments of pleasure he stacks up, the emptiness remains. Because what he craves is not skin, it's soul. Jung referred to this as a symbolic function of libido. That desire is not just sexual energy, but psychic energy. It is the fuel of the soul, and it flows toward whatever the unconscious believes will complete it. That's why desire can feel so urgent, so spiritual, so impossible to resist. It is the psyche's desperate call for union, for meaning, for inner balance. But instead of interpreting that desire, instead of listening to it and understanding it, we act on it blindly. We chase, we consume, we numb, and in doing so, we never stop to ask, what is this desire really trying to tell me? This is the masculine dilemma in our age. To be hungry and never full, to be praised for physical conquest while dying inside from emotional starvation. Men are trained to chase what looks like satisfaction, but forbidden from exploring what actually satisfies them. That's why Jung's warning is so urgent today. Because if male desire is misinterpreted, if it remains unconscious, it becomes destructive. It leads men into cycles of addiction, failed relationships, and self-betrayal. And worse, it convinces them that their longing is shameful when in fact it is sacred. The truth is, men don't just want sex. They want to be seen. They want to be held in their rawness, respected in their vulnerability, and honored for their inner world, even if they don't know how to articulate it yet. What society has dismissed as lust is often a deeply buried cry for intimacy, and not just with others, but with themselves. Because when a man starts to listen, really listen, to his own desire, he begins to uncover what he's actually starving for: peace, clarity, belonging, and purpose. Not just dopamine, but depth. Not just excitement, but equilibrium. Jung believed that if this energy is brought into consciousness, if it is faced, explored, and understood, then it can transform. The same desire that once enslaved you can now awaken you, because the fire inside you is not evil. It is sacred. It is a part of you that still believes in union with your soul, your purpose, your forgotten self. So when desire arises, ask yourself not how do I act on this, but what does this say about me? Where is this energy coming from? What am I actually longing for? What am I trying to find? And why haven't I found within? And when you ask those questions, not with judgment, but with curiosity, that's when everything begins to change. That's when you stop being a victim of your hunger and start becoming its master. This is a forgotten truth about male desire. It's not about bodies. It's about becoming whole again. It's about returning to yourself. And that is the journey Jung invited every man to take. A journey not outward, but inward. A journey not of conquest, but of integration. Not toward someone else, but toward who you truly are. In the depths of a man's psyche lives a hidden figure, not a woman of flesh and blood, but an internal image crafted from his unconscious longing, his memories of the feminine, and emotional patterns he's absorbed since childhood. Carl Jung called this image the anima, the feminine archetype within every man. And according to Jung, when this inner image remains unconscious, it becomes dangerous. Because instead of understanding that the anima is a part of himself, a man begins to see her outside, in real women in fantasy, in every woman who reflects even a fragment of the softness, beauty, or mystery he associates with the feminine. This is anima projection, and it is one of the most seductive and destructive forces in a man's inner world. When a man projects his anima onto a woman, he isn't seeing her as she truly is. He is seeing a symbol, a fantasy, a mirror of his inner feminine needs, and unresolved emotional material. He idealizes her, places her on a pedestal, and begins to feel that without her, he is incomplete. The woman, unknowingly, becomes a carrier of his unlived emotional life. He doesn't fall in love with her reality. He falls in love with the meaning he has assigned to her presence. This is why so many men become emotionally dependent, obsessive, or even devastated by relationships that, on the surface, didn't seem particularly deep or lasting. It's not because of the woman herself. It's because she was carrying something far more precious, the man's own anima, his emotional core, his hidden soul. And when she leaves, it feels as if a part of him has been ripped away. The most painful part is that he never truly loved her, at least not in the conscious, grounded sense. He loved what she represented to his unconscious. She became a projection screen for his yearning. And no matter how real the emotions felt, they were built on illusion. This is not to say that projection is inherently bad. In fact, it's a natural part of psychological development. We all project aspects of ourselves onto others. But the danger lies in remaining unaware of that projection. Because when a man doesn't know that he's projecting, he becomes blind to the other person's reality. He also becomes vulnerable to manipulation, emotional dependency, and self-betrayal, all in the name of love. In Jungian psychology, the anima has stages of development. At the lowest level, she appears as purely sensual, a seductive temptress. As a man matures, she evolves into more integrated forms, a romantic figure, a wise guide, even a spiritual muse. But in each stage, the key task remains the same: to withdraw the projection and reclaim the anima as a part of oneself, to stop seeking her out there and begin integrating her in here. This means learning to feel emotions deeply without outsourcing them. It means embracing vulnerability, creativity, and receptivity, not as weaknesses, but as sacred aspects of one's wholeness. The more a man knows and accepts the feminine within, the less he becomes enslaved by women without. That's the path Jung described as individuation, the journey toward inner balance. And anima integration is central to this process for men, because without it, every relationship becomes a minefield illusion. Every woman becomes either an angel or a demon, and the man remains split, forever chasing what he has refused to find within. Worse still, society encourages this split. Popular culture tells men that women will complete them, save them, fix them, that a perfect woman exists, one who will satisfy every emotional, sexual, and spiritual need. But this myth is not only false, it's damaging, because it prevents men from growing up emotionally. It traps them in adolescent fantasy, and it guarantees disappointment. The moment the illusion fades, the moment a woman fails to meet the impossible standard the anima projection demands, the man feels betrayed. not by her, but by the collapse of his own unconscious belief. He may respond with anger, withdrawal, or despair. But the truth is simple. He was never in a relationship with her. He was in a relationship with himself, a part of himself he hadn't yet met. This is why so many relationships fall apart after the infatuation stage. It's not because love died. It's because projection dissolved. The spell broke. Reality returned. And what remains is a challenge of truly seeing and being seen. The solution is not to avoid love, nor is it to reject desire or connection. The solution is awareness. When a man recognizes the anima within, when he begins the difficult work of integrating her as part of his psychological whole, he no longer needs to chase illusions. He can love a woman for who she is, not for what she represents. And in doing so, he frees her and himself from the chains of unconscious roles. To do this requires inner work, shadow work, emotional honesty, the courage to feel deeply and to see clearly, and above all, the willingness to stop looking for salvation outside and to turn inward toward the sacred feminine within his own soul. This is what Jung meant when he said, "The man who does not know his anima becomes possessed by her." It is not a warning against women. It is a call to maturity, a psychological rite of passage, a journey every man must take, not to escape desire, but to understand it, not to kill the anima, but to meet her, honor her, and finally integrate her. And in that integration, true love becomes possible because it is no longer confused with projection. It becomes clear, conscious, grounded, and the man at last becomes whole. For the modern man, there is no greater act of rebellion than looking inward, in a world that constantly pulls him outward, into distractions, performances, endless proving. The path to wholeness is not found in more achievement or validation. It is found in silence, in reflection, in facing the hidden parts of himself that he was taught to suppress. This is the essence of shadow work, the uncomfortable, transformative process that Carl Jung called the most difficult path a man can take. Shadow work is not about perfection. It is about integration. It's the courage to meet the parts of yourself you have disowned, the anger, the shame, the neediness, the fear, and bring them into the light. Because whatever remains buried in the unconscious doesn't disappear. It controls you from the dark. And nowhere is this more true than in how a man relates to his own desire. When a man represses his emotional pain, vulnerability, or unmet need for connection, those parts don't vanish. They become shadow. And from the shadow, they twist themselves into distorted behaviors, into lust that has no meaning, emotional dependency masked as passion, or obsessive attraction mistaken for love. He thinks he's chasing pleasure, but he's actually running from his own inner wounds. Shadow work requires brutal honesty. It asks a man to stop blaming others, especially women, for the chaos he feels inside. It demands he stop outsourcing responsibility for his emotions, his loneliness, his emptiness. It invites him to ask, what am I carrying in my shadow? What part of me have I locked away and why? Often, the answer goes back to childhood, moments when a boy learned that certain feelings were unacceptable. Maybe he was punished for crying, mocked for needing affection, told that to be a man meant to be cold, hard, and unfeeling. So, he buried the softer parts of himself. But the human psyche does not let go of those parts easily. They live on, in the unconscious, waiting to be felt, seen, and reintegrated. This is why many men find themselves confused by their own patterns. They don't understand why they keep falling for the wrong person, why they sabotage intimacy, why they feel emotionally numb or swing between craving and avoidance. These are not random issues. They are the effects of a split psyche, a man divided from his inner truth. Jung believed that healing does not come from getting rid of darkness, but from making it conscious. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, he wrote, but by making the darkness conscious. In other words, true masculinity isn't about always being in control. It's about knowing what's inside you well enough that nothing controls you from the shadows. When a man begins this inner work, he often faces resistance, not just from the world, but from within himself. There's fear, shame. The ego fights to protect the illusion of strength. But something incredible happens when he stays with the process. The things he feared start to lose power. He realizes that his anger had a message. His sadness had a story. His neediness wasn't weakness. It was wounded trust. And then, slowly, he begins to feel something new. A clarity, a quiet strength, a sense of being rooted in himself, not defined by others. He no longer needs to prove his masculinity, because he knows it from within. He no longer chases women as emotional saviors, because he has started to meet his own needs. His desire becomes clearer, no longer driven by shadow, but guided by awareness. Shadow work also transforms relationships. When a man is unconscious of his shadow, he will project it onto others, especially intimate partners. He may blame them for making him feel small, rejected, or angry, not realizing that these wounds existed long before they came into his life. But when he owns his shadow, he stops projecting. He starts relating. He sees the other person for who they are, not as a mirror for his unresolved pain. This is the foundation of emotional maturity, and it's also the path to authentic love. Because when you are no longer at war with yourself, you stop making others fight your battles. You can meet another from a place of wholeness, not hunger. One of the greatest gifts of shadow work is that it reconnects a man with his own soul. Beneath the roles he plays, the achiever, the provider, the protector, lies a deeper identity, a part of him that is creative, intuitive, receptive, and whole. When he reclaims this part, he is no longer fragmented. He becomes integrated, masculine and feminine, light and dark, strength and softness, fully human. This is not a one-time process. It is a lifelong path, a spiral inward, a continual shedding of illusion and return to truth. But every step taken in self-awareness is a step away from unconscious suffering. Every moment of honesty becomes an act of self-liberation. So when desire arises, not just sexual, but emotional, spiritual, let it become a signal, not a trap. Instead of reaching outward in desperation, turn inward with curiosity. Ask yourself, what part of me is trying to be heard? What pain needs attention? What longing have I ignored? The man who does this work, quietly, humbly, consistently, begins to walk with a different presence. He is not desperate. He is not reactive. He is not controlled by impulses. He has met his shadow. And because of that, he moves through life not as a boy chasing fulfillment, but as a man anchored in truth. This is a journey Jung pointed toward, not to suppress desire, but to awaken through it, to reclaim power not through dominance, but through integration, to no longer fear what's within, and to finally become whole. We began this journey with a simple but unsettling question. What if what you truly crave is not sex, but something far deeper? Through the lens of Carl Jung's psychology, we have peeled back the layers of male desire, exposing it not as a mere biological urge, but as a mirror of the unconscious. Behind the craving lies a spiritual hunger for union, for meaning, for wholeness. And when this hunger is misunderstood, when it is projected outward blindly, it leads men into cycles of illusion, obsession, and emotional dependency. The anima, the inner feminine, is not someone to find in the world. She is someone to meet within. When men confuse the anima for a woman, they lose themselves in fantasy. But when they integrate her, they gain access to emotional depth, intuition, creativity, and the capacity to truly love. The shadow, too, plays its role. All that is repressed, vulnerability, sadness, fear, lives in the dark corners of psyche. And until a man faces those parts with honesty and compassion, they will drive his desire from the background, turning love into addiction and longing into self-destruction. But the great hope in Jung's message is this. Transformation is possible. Through shadow work, through withdrawal projection, through deep self-inquiry, a man can reclaim his power. He can stop chasing illusions and start embodying truth. He can stop outsourcing love and begin cultivating it within. And when that happens, desire is no longer something to fear or be ashamed of. It becomes a guide, a compass, a sacred fire, not one that burns him, but one that lights the way home. So to every man listening, your desire is not your enemy. It is your teacher. Let it guide you inward. Let it awaken you to who you really are. And once you've seen the truth, never settle for illusions again. If this message stirred something inside you, don't let it fade. Subscribe to Whispers of Psychology. Share this with those still caught in the illusion. And remember, the journey is not towards someone else. It's toward your own soul.